Good afternoon. This is Doris Brinker again with DB Healthcare Consulting and Education and Brinker Coding Camps. Today's video is going to be additional considerations to factor in your employment search, as well as questions you should consider yourself asking a company, whether you are working as a vendor, 1099, or W-2 employee. The first is going to be training. So again, there is another video. I did post video. I posted it everywhere I could post it. Videos about questions you should ask and new coders. So this is whether you are a new coder or established coder, probably more so for the established coder. Some things you want to consider, because these are things that you don't want to know about after, because they may have shifted your opinion or changed your decision on taking that job. So the first would be training. And I know these are going to sound like HPI elements for evaluation of management coding, but I promise it's not E&M. You don't have to stop the video. You want to ask with training, duration, location, and context. So you want to find out from a duration standpoint whether your training duration is going to be fixed, meaning, yes, all employees go through a 2-week training program, and what it is going to consist of. Sometimes training is, this is how we do it here. Other times training is, this is how you do it. So if you're crossing over from one specialty to another, you probably need more of this is how we do it, as opposed this is how to do it, as opposed to this is how we do it here. If you're experienced, you want to know how they do it there, so you can couple that with your already your experience already and get it there. So from a duration standpoint, if it's a 2-week program, a 3-week program, and do they train you for a fixed period of time, or do they train you until you're ready? So it may be, yes, you have to come on site. Even in remote opportunities, companies sometimes require you to come on site, which is why when you're looking at so many of these jobs that are posted, they'll tell you for some of the remote opportunities that you must be located in a certain state. The companies are doing that because they're trying to minimize the traveling expenses they have to pay to fly you to a location, to lodge you, maybe pay for meals, plus your salary that you're paid during the training as well. So you want to find out what that is like. If that's going to mean, hey, you have to be here until a person checks out on all your work, clears you, and says she's ready to go, she's good to go, or if it is a fixed training program or fixed training duration that says, yep, you'll be here for a week, 2 days, 3 weeks, and then you go home. The location. So are you training on site at the employer? Are you able to do this remotely? A lot of folks that contact me regarding my educational services, they'll say, listen, like I can't do the virtual course. I can't do the online course. The online doesn't work for me. Well, that's important for you to think about and consider in your job search, because if you are doing a remote opportunity, you might have a remote training program. And if you aren't able to capture some of those key things, you know, that's not something that you're going to be able to use as an excuse later on if it doesn't work out for you. So find out, how will I be trained? Is it an option for me to come on site to be trained? Is that an option? Or do you only train remotely? Because you might find yourself in that same kind of situation or place of discomfort that, made you kind of go away from an online program. And then the context is how do you do it versus how they may do it at that organization. Second point you want to consider is resources. Does the company require you as a coder to have any resources? There are some, if you work remotely, many of them will tell you if they don't provide a computer for you, you have to have your own computer, especially if it's something that you're dialing into the system. So it's like everything is dial on to our site and get your email, and you can access the portal with the clients on our site as well. That's all you need. That's not totally uncommon. You may have to have your own internet access, and you might have to pay for internet access. So they might say, listen, we're paying $25 an hour or $24 an hour or whatever, but you must be able to provide internet access because you'll have to dial on. When I audit, for example, I'm dialing into client systems. So like I can't provide you with a computer with this client info because we might be servicing multiple clients at a time. And because it's not interconnected, it's not one system. So everything is kind of done in the cloud or remotely, wherever the cloud is. So ensure you ask them what resources you're going to need that you would have to provide. If they provide the resource for you, you don't have to worry about it. I don't know one company that provides internet. But you would need internet to dial into wherever they have you dialing into. Coding manuals. I think it's a great idea as a coder every single year that you buy your coding manuals. Usually they have early deals. I know the AMA, I usually buy my coding books from the AMA, but I buy them early enough that I usually get that coding deal where I can get my CPT, my HCPCS, my Insider, and all of that for a pretty good rate. And again, you can write those kind of things off. But if you're a coder like myself that, you started in this industry before we had all of these electronic versions of books and resources, you might be highly preferential to your books and your manuals. And to save expenses, a lot of companies aren't buying those manuals for you. They're giving you things like an Encoder Pro or a Code Correct or some similar type system, a knowledge base, something for you to dial on and have access to all the codes and the descriptions and that kind of thing. And if you're just not used to that, you might say, I just want to pay for my own books, because they'll give you access to the system where you can access it online, but you don't have that tangible piece of paper that you're used to touching that you prefer to use in your daily work. So again, might be preference, might be required. It is not a bad idea to ask about the sustainability of the company. Okay, questions like, have you had any layoffs? If you're in coding, code review, management, auditing, anything kind of coding related reimbursement, have they done any layoffs? Because some companies do a bunch of layoffs, they get work and they do a bunch of hiring, and they do a bunch of layoffs, and then they do a bunch of hiring. So it's an emotional roller coaster to work for those kinds of companies. Talking to a current employee or a former employee is also not bad, because if I'm trying to sell you my car where the AC doesn't work and it cuts off occasionally, I'm probably not going to tell you that. Why? Because you wouldn't buy my car, just like you wouldn't take that job. So it's not a bad idea to speak with other employees of the organization as well, if you have the ability to do that. What is the growth of the company? What's projected? So historically, has the company year over year grown, and they're projecting more growth because it's just kind of been on track? It's all estimations, it's all forecast, and none of it's really guaranteed. But if a company has lost money year over year and laid off, in my eyes, that company is less attractive to me as an employee, and whether it's a 1099 or a W-2, that company is less attractive to me than a company that's had a pretty long history of sustainability. So that's not a bad question for you to ask. If you're starting and they just opened up positions, you might want to ask, so what, the company's hiring, what's the need for coders now? Is it business that you've just gotten? Is it ask those questions. It's okay if your interviewer doesn't know the answer to those questions, and some of them may not. They might be new with the company just like you. But again, ask the questions. You'll never get the answer if you don't ask. If it's a contract, long-term or short-term contract, you want to ask the duration of the contract. Who are you working for? Are you working specifically are you being hired to manage that contract, or are you being hired for the company? This is important because staffing agencies, you might get a project and a job with a staffing agency, but a staffing agency can only put you on projects that they have. So if they hire you, and yes, I'll pay benefits and I'll do all of the stuff and I'll pay you for that because you're going to be the person who works for this hospital, what is the duration of that hospital contract that they have? And what happens if that contract is canceled? Huge hospital corporations make decisions, especially if they deal with management services organizations or MSOs. They make decisions all the time to start and stop contracts. They will outsource coding to a company that does, like a management services organization, and they will bring it back inside and have it done by their employees. So you want to get as much information as possible. Remember, interviews are opportunities for you to gather information about who would become your employer, or whoever you're going to work for, as well as them figuring out whether or not you're a fit. So it really is something mutual, so there should be a mutual dialogue. You're not just going there to put on your best face, say something super awesome, and hope you get a job. Not from a long-standing perspective, because you might find that you get a job and you just want to bang your head up against the wall because there are things that if you knew, you would not have taken the job. So the sustainability of the organization is going to be important as well. And then you want to talk about for you. So company growth, yeah, but what about your growth? Maybe it's not your desire. Maybe you just want to get in and code, and you're one of those people that you can just code records until you ease into retirement, and that is just fine for you. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a preference. But you do want to ask things like, find out, does the company give raises? There's kind of an expectation, because every year it seems like cost of living goes up, that you would think a company is going to give you a raise every year. Every company does not give raises. Okay, don't expect it. You might say, I've been working here for 2 years and 3 years and I'm making the same whatever dollar amount I've been making. Well, that might not be a company that projects raises in their overhead year over year. So you want to ask, does the company give raises? And if so, is it dollar amount or is it fixed? I say that because some companies actually have a cap. They have a cap. So if you make $22 an hour, they may say we give between 0 and 5%. That's the raise for the auditing staff or the coding staff. If it's that average 3%, you make $22 an hour, you're going to be upset when you have $66 cents more per hour. And you think, oh, I got a 66-cent raise, and people get upset about that because you might not actually see the difference in your check even after you've gotten your raise. If it was 5%, you'd get like $1.10. Cents, and maybe that you'll see that a little bit better. But some companies have a mindset, and I've heard it and I've seen it, that, well, no one gets 5%. If the rate is 0 to 5, no one really gets 5% because 5% means you've got no room for improvement, and we're not perfect, so no one is in a state where they, don't have a room for improvement. So just ask those questions because you don't want to find out, well, wait a second, I only got 60 cents. I had an employee get upset and insulted when I managed for a company because that was how they did it. And she didn't ask that question. I didn't know that was how they did it either. So I figured that out after I'd started working because I'd come from an environment where when you got a raise, like you saw the difference. There were like dollars that were involved. It wasn't this percentage that probably came to cents or, barely a buck or over a buck. So food for thought and things you need to know. If raises aren't important for you, then just don't ask. Just make sure when you're taking a job, you look at the base salary and try to make your decision based on the base salary. The next point is going to be, bonuses. So do they give bonuses? There are companies that have production bonuses, quality bonuses. Some of them, as the company does well, they pay that forward with their employees. There's some companies that don't do that. Employees will stay in the seat because, I get bonuses. Well, ask, are there bonuses? What's the criteria for the bonuses? How often are the bonuses given? And know that some bonuses are based on jobs. So if you get offered a job as an auditor, you might not be subject to the bonuses, but the coders are, right? Because you're not in a production environment. So know whether or not your job kind of falls into that. You might say, I'm going to start a job and, the money's a little bit lower, but I'm a hard worker. I'll get in, I'll do my best, and I know it's going to pay off for me because it's always paid off before. You also want to ask within an organization, how soon are you able to change positions in the organization? So let's say, well, I've got management experience and I've got supervisory experience or whatever, and I've been a manager, but you only have a supervisor position open right now. Not really what I want, but I need to work, so I'm going to go ahead and take the supervisory position. Fast forward 6 months later, a management position opens up. You might not be eligible to take that position because the company might have criteria written that says you have to be in the organization in your current job for a certain period of time before you're eligible for promotion, right? So how upsetting would it be for you to think, well, I started to get my foot in the door and now they won't give me a position because I haven't been here a year. They just filled it with someone else when they know that was the job I wanted. Or they went outside the company, which may make less sense to you, but it could be how they do it. Then again, you want to ask those questions, do that diligence, because if your strategy is I work hard and I know it'll be noticed, you might not be able to move no matter how hard you work because that's just the company's rule, that can't kind of be overridden. It's probably not something you want to fight because it is what it is. So when it comes to promotion or changing positions, maybe you're a coder and you're applying for a coding position in another department because it's a more complex specialty and they pay more. Same thing. You want to ask, what's the criteria for me moving? Like, how do I have to be in the position for a certain period of time before I'm eligible for promotion or a change in job? So that's part of the whole expansion, the money, perks, and growth kind of conversation that you should ask. And finally, the no competes or any kind of restrictions, employment restrictions. It's not uncommon. Doctors have restrictions, hairstylists have restrictions. A lot of specialties and have restrictions on employment restrictions. So what I strongly advise you to do is not get so excited about the money or whatever is being offered that you overlook something that could be detrimental to you in your career and kind of stunt your career growth. I'll share a story with you. I had an opportunity to audit for a company. I actually do multi-specialty coding, so I'm not limited to, orthopedic or anesthesia or interventional, or like I've been in quite a few specialties that I have a comfort with. And I was offered an auditing position with a company that only dealt with one specialty. And the salary was great. I mean, if you want to get clouded and blocked, the salary was a really fair, highly commensurate with my experience. I had nothing negative to say about the salary. It did require a great deal of traveling, which is why I kind of took a couple days to do some inflection and really think about it and not get clouded by the numbers. And when I received the employment contract, it was a 1099. So again, ask that question. Am I paying my own taxes, or is it a W-2 situation where you will pay my taxes? That doesn't bother me. I've been self-employed for years, so I'm used to paying my own taxes. It was a 1099 position, but when I read the agreement, because this company was one specialty, I was prohibited from working for any provider that worked in that specialty, even if it was a multi-specialty situation, that they had multiple specialties in the office. I couldn't work for any provider in any context for that specialty. It did not matter if the provider was a former client or current client of mine. It didn't matter whether they were a current or former client of the employer that I was looking to work with. They could have had no relationship whatsoever. If they were of that specialty, I was not able to legally work for that provider type. So that meant, years of experience that I had for that specialty would have needed to be negated. And someone asked a question on one of the posts, well, what if I get terminated? So let's say I take the job, hey, it's not working out, Doris, we've got to let you go. I had a restriction where I think I couldn't work for, it was like 18 months or 2 years. I couldn't work in that specialty for 18 months or 2 years. So you know how stale your experience can go for 18 months or 2 years. Even if I'd lost the job, whether I quit the job voluntarily, whether I was terminated, whatever the situation was, it didn't override, and legally it doesn't override the obligation to uphold the employment restriction or covenant. So, moreover, it wasn't in an area. It wasn't saying, hey, you can't work with our clients. This is a list of our clients. If you leave, you can't work with these clients because we have a relationship, and that's kind of poaching or stealing. I don't work like that. So I felt like it was fair to say that, but it capped an entire market all over the country. So I couldn't even deal with the providers in my geographic region. It was any provider in that specialty in the US. So I did get an attorney's feedback. I wanted to share. I wanted to ensure that I was reading it right, because I'm thinking, no, that can't possibly be what it meant. I got my attorney's advice, and my attorney advised me to not sign it. She strongly advised against it. I took her recommendation. I bypassed on the job. Had I taken that job, and it didn't work out, that would have been detrimental to my business today, because it's a specialty that I've worked with in years. So that's something to really consider as you go in your journey. Those things are meant to protect the employer, and it's not bad. But you have to say, how limited am I? Doesn't mean I can't work for them anymore. I can't work for their clients. That's not unfair. You can't come and get my client list and then compete against me. That was kind of the whole crux and basis of non-compete. Or doesn't mean I can't do what I do. I may have to shift industries and change specialties, and maybe go into specialties that I have no experience in. That's like resetting your job market. So I hope you find those tips: training, sustainability, resources, no competes, and growth. I hope you find those tips very, very helpful as you start and begin or consider starting your employment search. And in Light and Love, this is Doris Brinker with DB Healthcare Consulting and Education. Good luck to you all.